So I spend 60 million bucks on average paying influencers for brands, products, and mobile apps. But it all started from back then, the Victory Poker days.
That's a TikTok right there. I'm paying 60 million to influencers. 100%. I'm putting that on TikTok. That's beautiful, man. Did you grow up in Dallas?
Yes.
Okay. So at the age of 21, you're incarcerated for selling drugs. Shout out. You know, I was the same time.
Shout out.
If anybody in America knows the metric system, it's not from school. They're definitely a reformed drug dealer.
It's from pushing weight in Dallas. So I grew up in Dallas, very familiar. I didn't sell drugs, but I grew up in the ghetto. I went to high school in a really bad neighborhood. I had a lot of friends that were drug dealers back then. So this is something I'm a little familiar with. Getting out of prison, turn your life around 7 figures, start selling real estate. What can you talk about this at 21? Where were you, by the way? Where in Dallas were you?
So I lived off Stewman and Ardelia.
So you were near Woodrow Wilson too, but you've been Bryan Adams. Is that what high school you're at?
Man, I did not go to high school.
Really?
I left school in the 8th grade. My parents moved to the suburbs in the 9th grade, and I attended like the first semester of the 9th grade in this small town called Allen.
Yeah, of course.
And then I bolted. And back then, Allen's kind of a big town now, but back then
you were selling drugs in East Dallas. How did we not meet? I don't understand. That's crazy,
How old
man.
are you?
I'm 44.
Yeah, shit. So my wife's best friend's husband, who's a really good friend of mine too, literally lived in the apartment complex that shared the wall with mine. He's the exact same age and everything. I never fucking met him until we were 40 years old, which is probably a good thing.
I went to high school with your plug. I almost guarantee you I did. Yeah.
For sure, because he was about 2 years older than me.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So that whole thing, what got you into it, and then what got you out of it?
Well, I worked at a car wash, and I was the guy that sold car washes. So like when you come in, you want a $10 wash. And this guy one day asked me, I asked him what he did for a living. He was always had like nice cars and jewelry. I thought he was a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And he's like, "You smoke weed?" And I was like, "Yeah." And this is in the 90s, so that was very taboo back then, right? And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, hit me up tonight." It was New Year's Eve. He said, "Hit me up tonight, and you can buy some of my weed, and you'll see how I get this money." I'm like, all right, that's interesting, And so I hit him up that night to get some weed, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I need like a lot." And he's like, "What do you need?" It's like an ounce, right? Like that seemed like a lot to me at the time. And anyway, I go to his house. There's a bunch of people there, and he's counting up money and shit. And I was like, "Man, this looks like it pays a lot better than this car wash."
Yeah.
A lot of downsides, like going to prison.
Prison is a downside. Yeah, for sure.
I moved from weed to coke, tried coke one time in my whole life, and I overdosed on the shit.
Oh, no.
And I don't know if I overdosed or I had an adverse reaction, whatever. It ain't for me. And but because of that, the chick I was with ran in, called the police. I was with prostitute because coke and hoes go together.
Yeah,
that's
they
just
do.
How they're supposed to.
It's a mathematical equation.
Absolutely. It's like peanuts and M&Ms, you know. And so she called 911, and literally just across the street was the fire department. Like not even a quarter mile. Like maybe
is this on Stewman or Abrams? Where is this?
At this time, I'm 18, so I'm back living in Plano.
Okay, Plano.
So grew up in Dallas, and then by the time I had left school and shit, I moved into the suburbs and stuff like that. The competition selling drugs over there was like very thick, not so much in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Right? Like Plano and Allen didn't have the same context as Stewman and Ardelia. And so anyway, fire department brought me back to life. Long story short, wake up in the hospital and go to court a year or two later. They end up giving me 2 years in prison. But my lawyer told me that it would be like, "Oh man, you're going to do 90 days."
2 years in prison for the possession of the marijuana?
For dealing coke.
For dealing coke, got it. Okay, got it. But it was powder.
Yes.
That's how you got 2 years. Because in the state of Texas, if it's crack, I mean, it's way more than 2 years.
They changed that now, but back then, hell yes. Yes. George Bush actually, on his way out of office, changed that law federally. I was actually in prison when they let them all go.
Yeah.
Because I went back.
The thought was that discriminated against African Americans exclusively selling crack cocaine and not powdered cocaine.
Because it carried 10 times the amount of time, and so it's like, and it's majority black folks that were convicted of that, so it became this racist deal. And Obama took a lot of credit for it, but I was in prison when Bush signed that because I watched everybody going home.
Yeah, for sure.
So. Anyway, lawyer tells me I'm going to do 4 or 5 months. Good behavior, I'll be out. That turned out to be a lie. I did like 18 or 19 months on a 24-month sentence. I went to 6 or 8 different fucking prisons. So it was like it wasn't just one place that I got to stay. I went on this whole royal tour of bullshit.
This was a state felony though,
yes.
Right? Not federal. Okay.
Got out, got my shit together, went back to the car wash because car washes hire felons.
Yeah.
Went back to the car wash, worked my ass off at this job. And one day the customer, there was a regular customer, she said, "You're always selling me a car wash. You do a good job on my car. I want to give you a job." I said, "What you got?" She said, I work in mortgages. What's that mean?
Right.
I have like literally no idea. Never heard that word in my life. And she's like home loans. And I was like, oh, I don't know nothing about loans. I own that truck over there for cash. I pay cash for my apartment. She goes, I can teach you. And I'm like giving her objections, And I'm like, well, and I'm a convicted felon. And she's like, oh, for what? And I was like, I got caught selling drugs. She's like, hell, probably you'll be fine. You might even meet some new customers in the office.
Sounds like a good salesman to me. Yeah.
So I quit my job. She said this, as long as, hey, I tell you what, they took you back after prison. Surely they'll take you back after the bank. Come work for me. If it doesn't work out, I'll come get you your job back at the car wash. So I go take this job. Within, say, 3 weeks of taking the job, I made like almost $10,000.
All right.
Whoa.
I just got stumbled into a deal. Then about 2 weeks later, I made another like $14,000 or $15,000. So I used to work all year long to make 30 grand, and now I did it in like 2 months. So I went all in, dude. I bought a bunch of, this was the subprime days, bought a bunch of houses, bunch of rent properties. I owned 32 houses by the time I was 25 years old. And the cops raided my main house. They thought I was selling dope again. I was working from home. I knew how to hack into the bank server.
Yeah.
So I would just work from home and do the applications there. This desert air is killing my voice. But I worked from home, but I would have people from the houses paying rent. So the first of the month, people from the houses coming by, real estate agents coming by, property managers coming by. So I had a busy ass house, and 1 minute it might be somebody in an old beat up, car that is one of my hood houses that they're renting, and then there might be a realtor come by in a Benz 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
So I get how the cops probably thought I was selling drugs.
Well, are you in Plano at this time?
Back in Allen.
Okay.
And so, but when they kicked the door in, I didn't have so much as even a sandwich bag.
Yeah.
But I had guns.
Okay.
And so in Texas, you can have guns if you're a felon.
You can have lots of guns.
You can have whatever you want.
Yeah.
But there's some federal rules that expired now, but back then existed under Joe Biden, of all people, and Clinton back in those days. Not Obama and Biden, but way back in the Clinton days. And they had passed some kind of law that was you couldn't have so many rounds in a clip or some shit under the Brady bill, if you remember that stuff.
I do
right?
remember. I think it's 20 or 30 rounds in an assault rifle clip.
It's all expired now, right? And but anyway, back then, so they found some loophole. So I beat the state, and then I was going to sue the city for fucking embarrassing me and dragging me through the mud. I didn't know that their retaliation would be to turn me over to the feds, who like then stuck that other crime on me, which they end up charging me with international transport of a firearm.
Are we talking about the ATF raid that happened later? So the you ended up, after you get out of prison, the local DPD comes out. I'm sorry, I guess Allen Police Department.
Allen,
They come and they invade you. You embarrass them because you beat the rap, and then they turn it over to the feds, so that now the ATF then raids you. Is that
they
correct?
don't raid me. They just call me one day and they say, "Hey man, we need you to come down here and talk to us."
Yeah.
I'm like, man, what kind of prank? I had just started this new job, and they were like, "We need you to come to the Bank of America building." I was like, "Man, it's some bullshit. I'm not working at Bank of America. I took a job over at this other mortgage company," and they're like, "We're serious, Mr. Stewman." So I showed up, and sure enough, and they never cuffed me or anything. They took me in there. They gave me a drug test, and I passed the drug test, so they let me out on my own reconnaissance. So, like, I didn't do a night in jail or anything like that.
Were you still on probation? Is that why they had doing a drug test?
I had been off for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
But they were saying, hey, if you pass the drug test, you can go home. If not, it's going to be a long fucking ride for him. Like, well, I didn't know I was going to get arrested. What the hell does that have to do with anything? But I didn't have any drugs anyway, but can imagine, it's like I didn't know that was going to be a prerequisite of getting out, or I'd have walked around clean. But
That's
I just
crazy.
happened to walk around clean anyway. So I go back. They tell me they're going to give me 20 years. I get my lawyer elected as district attorney of Dallas County, right? It's a whole other fucking story. My life's pretty damn interesting.
Well, who's this attorney?
His name is Craig Watkins. He was the first ever African-American elected judicial official in all of Dallas County. They never had a black judge, a black DA, or any of that.
We need to talk about Dallas when we get a chance. Go ahead. Yeah.
And he was the first Democrat to ever be in the judiciary system there, which now is largely Democratic, it's flipped since then. Sorry. And but he pulled some strings and got my time reduced to 15 months. I ended up going to federal prison for 15 months, lost everything. 2008.
But hold on, a federal prison, just so people know, you do day for day. There's no get out early on parole when you get convicted of a federal crime.
Yeah, and they do it in months, not years.
Yeah.
And so now I'm federal property. I go live in a federal prison, and Federal prison is a lot different than state. We had our own movie theater, just to put it in perspective, our own little field house and shit. It's very nice.
Yeah, again, just so people understand, a lot of minimum security federal prisons are actually on military bases. So
that's what this was.
So Maxwell Air Force Base is a minimum security prison, and it's a U.S. Air Force base. That happens a lot, but all the lawn, the gardening, all that kind of stuff is handled by the prisoners. Go ahead.
Yep, you're exactly right, and that's what we did. I was in one that was behind the fence, but it was a minimum security that used to be at a base that was taken over. Now it's just a prison. And 15 months there, but this is where the story gets cool. So 2 days or 2 weeks after I walk into this prison, I'm waiting in line to eat breakfast. And in front of me are these 2 Hispanic guys that I used to sell drugs with when I was like a teenager that I got caught with the first time. But I didn't snitch on anybody.
Yeah.
And I got no case, and I never told on anybody back then. I got integrity or whatever the hell you want to call it, right? And I tap him on the shoulder. I'm like, hey, yo, Angel, remember me? And he's like, no. And I was like, it's me, Breeze. I was like, my name. And he's like, hey, I thought you cleaned up and you were like a banker or some shit. It's like, me too. You're not going to believe this fucking story. But here I am for 15 months, right? And he goes, you're a banker now? I told him, he goes, I'm going to send somebody to talk to you. So, I go back after we eat breakfast. I go back to my cell. Some big, huge Mexican dude with like teardrops down to his ankle, like just covered in tattoos, comes and he's like, which one of you guys is Stewman? And my cellmate's like, it ain't me. It's like, well, fuck, there's only 2 of us. So I go upstairs with this guy. They're living in a different world upstairs. They got Rolexes on. They're smoking weed. There's like everything but chicks up there, right?
Yeah.
And where I was living was, for the last couple weeks, was totally different. But there were these gang leaders up there, these Hispanic gang leaders, and they were like, hey, man, we're trying to clean up our drug money so that when we get out of here in 5 or 6 years, we have actual real assets.
Yeah.
The dude said that you know about real estate and used to be a banker. You think you could help us? And I'm like, well, fuck, what they going to do, put us in jail? You know what I mean? Like, we're already fucking here. You know what I'm saying?
I did not think this podcast was going to go in this direction. All right, let's talk about this money laundering.
I am definitely anti-rape, so if we can keep that on hold, and I can get in good with because state prisons majority black, federal prisons majority Hispanic, because a lot of them are there on immigration holds.
Got it.
And so the majority of this place is Hispanic, man. There's 2,000 people, 50 of us are white, 50 of them are black, the rest of them are Hispanic, right, where we're at. And so it's really good to be in with those guys. So, dude, I start doing seminars in the law library on Wednesday. And so the first night, it's like the Tongo Blast guys, and then it's the Mexican Mafia the next week.
Have you ever heard this story before? No. You did not know that he was telling people about laundering money in federal prison. Keep going, Ryan.
That's where now I'm speaking on stage.
Hell yes,
I'm not teaching money laundering, I'm teaching money making, but in prison, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Is that your first speech?
Yes, that's how I became a fucking motivational speaker in prison.